2026, when fintechs can spin up cards in minutes and move money across borders in real time, it's still hard to decipher transactions. That's why financial institutions turn to Spade. Spade is the data and AI platform that turns messy transaction strings into structured, verified records in real time. To learn more, head to spade.com. That's spade.com. Hello again. Welcome back to episode 2 of season 4 now of the Fintech OGs. I'm back with my co-host Lauren of Spade, and we have 2 fabulous guests on today. We have Shanti from, is it Casap or Casap? How do you prefer to say it? I've heard both.
It's neither, actually. It's Casap.
Oh my God.
Case done. Casap.
Like a case study. Now I'm never gonna forget it. That's amazing. Okay, and then Natasha from Cable. I know how to pronounce Cable, so we're good. But I'm gonna let each of you do a quick intro on yourself. Shanti, I'll let you go first since I mispronounced your company name.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I'm glad that it gets me such privileges, like getting to go first. But yeah, Shanti, CEO, co-founder of Casap, stands for Get Your Case Done ASAP. We are a agentic platform for solving disputes and first-party fraud. Started the company 3 years ago, based out of New York and San Francisco. Before that, I was the second product hire at Robinhood, where I helped scale the company for 6 years, and my co-founder was at Chime. So just really built the company from a lot of the things we've seen in the guts. I think Natasha has a very similar story as well. And it's just been very fascinated by the problems that we solve. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm Tash. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cable. We automate compliance testing. So where banks have to have a bunch of controls in place, like identity verification or KYC, transaction monitoring, they also have to test whether any of that stuff works. And we're the first people, and so far, I think the only people to actually automate that. I'm also newly the host of the In Control podcast, which I'm loving. So I hope maybe I can have all of you on there one day.
There we go. You're booked out through May, you said. So it might be a few months before we can get on, but before the end of 2026, maybe we'll get a slot in.
Yeah, that's a list I want to be on. Natasha, maybe you could start by telling us a little bit more about how you got into fintech.
Yeah, for sure. And I was thinking we should do some where did our company names come from? And I am pleased that you explained that, Shanti, because I was wondering about that. So I will now not forget it, Casap. Yeah, so I was working in corporate finance back in London, and I was working I really liked the people I was working with, but I was really, really bored with the work itself. And I started going to a lot of fintech meetups in London. We have what we call the Silicon Roundabout, which is not as impressive as Silicon Valley. It is literally a roundabout.
And, what year is this too? Just so I get some timing there.
Yeah, this is 2015. So this is pretty early in the London tech scene. And I decided I wanted to get into tech, and I decided that fintech, or as we called it back then, challenger banking, was the place that I could add some value. I'd been in corporate finance for 5 years. I had a law degree and accountancy qualification. So kind of banking, finance made sense. And I decided that challenger banking was the place for me. And at the time in London, there was Revolut, Mondo, now Monzo, Tandem, and Starling. And I thought that Tom Blomfield and Mondo were the ones that I wanted to do this with. And I emailed Tom. They didn't have any jobs open at the time. There was 10 people in White Bear Yard, which was Passion Capital's little accelerator office that they had. And I, said, I want to start a bank and this is what I would do. And can I work with you? I had a pretty strange hiring process because they didn't really have a hiring process set up at that time. I organized an event for them with no real clear objectives other than have an event. And then I joined in January 2016 as just business operations, pretty quickly became head of financial crime. It was my first experience of anything compliance related, but it was really cool because I got to come at it with a totally fresh set of eyes and partner with a very experienced financial crime subject matter expert. And together we kind of wrote the policies and procedures to get us a UK banking license. I was there for 4.5 years. We went from no customers to 4.5 million customers. And then I left to start Cable. So that's kind of the whistle-stop tour of my background into founding Cable.
I think my new question of whether or not someone is a fintech OG or not is just going to be, what was Monzo's original name? And if they remember that right off the top of their head, then they're a fintech OG. You're good to go. But Shanti, I feel like you probably had a weird hiring process at Robinhood if you were their second product hire and stuff too. Was that your first job in fintech, or had you been in the space a little bit before that too?
Yeah, no, that was my first job at fintech. So for me, like my background was in electrical engineering, computer science from Berkeley, but I was very much like I could code, but I was so much more interested in figuring out what problems I should solve than like how to do it. So I like kind of stumbled into product. Like the way I thought about product was like someone pays me to like do things a founder would do without the risk of a founder. So I was like, this sounds great. And my first job actually.
Why did you ever stop that?
You know, that's a great question. It's one that I ask myself from time to time. Yeah, maybe I like pain. But yes. But yeah, no, like my first gig out of college was actually, you know, this is kind of funny for us to think about, but it was I was on there's this like rotational PM program at Facebook. That's actually where I met my co-founder like over a decade ago. But I was on these teams, and one team was literally called Women in Emerging Markets, which is like, Shanti, go figure out how to get women in emerging markets, specifically India, to use Facebook. And I'm like, they have better things to do with their time. So I, you know, 9 months in, I was just like, why does this need to exist? Why do I need to get more people to use Facebook? What truly matters to people? And I did something quite morbid, which is I wrote my own obituary. This sounds really wild, but I was like, what do I want to be able to say on my deathbed about my impact on this planet? It was like very like, woo. And then I just kind of realized that there's only two things that matter to people. And I think that's health and wealth. And then I was like, okay, because these domains matter so much, they're so regulated. And because they're so regulated, they feel very antiquated. And like, let me understand why. So I was very intentional when I chose Robinhood. I was only looking at health techs and fintechs. I wanted to be the first or second PM. Super early, needs to be the messiest, but I have to be surrounded by people that I thought were smarter than me. And Robinhood kind of checked a lot of those boxes. So yeah, that was my first foray into fintech. And timing wise, it was wild because I joined 2017 right into that crypto craze when Coinbase was number one in the App Store. And I think my first claim to fame at Robinhood was launching crypto with an amazing team. But I was definitely the crypto product lead and launched it in like 3 months, which is wild. So did that. And then the inspiration for Casap actually came from the whole GameStop fiasco, where I had to launch 24/7 phone and chat support and figure out how to build trust. And lo and behold, you build trust in these moments of friction and fear of fraud, disputes. And I realized that those situations were almost guaranteed to, you know, lose someone as a primary customer of Robinhood. Lots of compliant requirements that made our team very nervous about making, you know, consistent decisions, whether it's approving or denying, and then would always touch the bottom line when it came to fraud losses. So I was like, oh, that's a hairy problem that I just spent 3 years solving. And then when ChatGPT came out, I was like, huh, like everything changes now. And then that's when I started Casap. So that's the longer story, but yeah.
I wish we could spend the entire podcast talking about like what it was like being at Robinhood during the whole GameStop thing and stuff. But
another time.
were you guys all I forget exactly what months that happened, but you guys were remote still at that time, right? Or were you in person? Because I remember like COVID obviously was going on.
Yeah. So this is like kind of like COVID time. Actually, not kind of. It was like smack dab COVID time. So we were in person, then COVID, and then we were in person again as we were like scaling that.
Crazy. I mean, I guess that got you ready kind of for the pain of being a founder and like the adrenaline rush and like, you know, twists and turns and everything too. But that has to be, again, we need to do like a whole other episode on just that part of it, because I feel like all of us plus the listeners would love learning more about that as well. That brings me into another question though, a little bit too, is talk through a little bit about some career highs and lows. Not that would, I don't think that would be a high, maybe a different kind of high, but, or even necessarily a low. I feel like being a founder, there's so many other lows that you go through on just like a daily basis, like, you know, VC shooting down your ideas, like product not resonating with customers as much as you thought, something going wrong and like risk, compliance, etc. Given we're talking a lot about that too. But Tosh, maybe walk through, you know, whichever one comes to mind first, like a career high or low that you think of right away, and if it's a low, like how you got through that.
Yeah, I think that both of those things have like changed in their kind of structure over the years. I certainly remember lots of career highs at Monzo. Getting our banking license was just like this massive moment for us because of what we were doing at the time. And we were the first new banking license in God knows how many years there. And and, you know, reaching 1 million customers and then reaching 4 million customers and like spending no money on marketing. And then we launched a TV ad and that was huge. Like all of those things felt like really big and important at the time, and I have such fond memories of them. It was like Monzo in London probably felt quite similar to Robinhood in San Francisco at the time. Like we had these hot coral cards. I probably have one in my desk somewhere. We had these like hot coral cards, and you would go to any shop, any cafe, any restaurant in London, and people would be like, "Oh my God, have you got a Monzo card?" And then I'd be like, "Yeah, I work there." And they'd be like, "Oh my God, tell me about your job." And my wife was so relieved when I quit Monzo, because she was like, "I do not have to talk about Monzo over dinner ever again." And then I started a company and she was like, so those are all like highs, but they now in hindsight, they were like, they feel like quite young or immature in sort of how I felt about them at the time, because now compared to cable and compared to like the pride of having founded a company and even just having run it for 6 years, having kept it alive for this long, like that's a different kind of high and pride that I'm able to feel. But with that, the lows during cable have been so much lower than the lows that I had during Monzo. The lows during Monzo were more me learning how to manage or learning how to upward manage and present effectively at a board level with this regulated bank that I now worked in. And like they were like personal development lows that came with a lot of stress. But the lows of cable are like, I have to fire people and I am impacting someone's actual life. And we restructured our entire company. We were based in the UK and Europe, and we moved here, and we moved from remote to in person. And that was like basically an entire company restructure, which involved transitioning a lot of people out of the company. And, you know, I don't want to diminish how that felt for those people. It felt, I'm sure, truly awful for the people that were impacted, but the kind of low that it feels as the person like making that decision and going through that is a very different kind of low than I ever felt when it wasn't my company. So I guess in summary, being a founder, the highs are higher and the lows are way lower. And both of those things feel much more frequent than when I was just an employee.
Totally. I can't know myself really, but I see Shanti shaking her head in agreement the entire time you were talking there.
Yeah, I mean, you said it so well towards the end. The highs are high and the lows are low, and they're a lot more often. I feel like I'm so hyper stimulated as a founder CEO. I feel like I've almost made myself unemployable ever again because I can't imagine doing anything that's not this. But for me, yeah, like there's so many highs in my career so far at Robinhood. The IPO was insane. And at Casap so far too, we've been seeing really cool product market fit. I used to wonder, what does product market fit feel like at an enterprise company? You know, I've only had been Facebook, Robinhood, all consumer. It's very different. There's metrics. And I was like, oh, when you know, you know. And like, you know, we're at this moment now where I was at, like, I'll tell you a big high recently, and then I'll also tell you a low from like earlier case up. A big high recently was that we were at a pretty big conference last week, 2 weeks ago. And this is a conference this is the first conference I went to after I had my first child. You know, I still remember I was like pumping, nursing, feeling so awkward. I was the only person doing anything go to market a year ago. Like I just hired someone. My first time meeting him was at this conference, and we were like crashing this conference in the lobby, just trying to meet people. And I just felt, you know, I was doing my thing, but it just felt like I was just so invisible, right? And then this time I'm at this conference, you know, we have this big booth. I have 10 people on my sales team there. We host this dope Bollywood party where I'm teaching all of these banking executives how to do like a dance. And I'm walking through this like main lobby that everyone congregates at, and people are like stopping me. Like my team was joking. It's like, how long do you think it'll take to walk across this lobby with Shanti? Because everyone seems to know her. And the coolest part was when I would tell someone, you know, oh, yeah, I started this company, Casap. Like, Casap, I love you guys. And I was like, I know for a fact you're not a customer and we've never talked to you before. So the fact that there's this word of mouth, like I get goosebumps just thinking about it. So literally like 2 weeks ago was like a very, very big moment for like, wow, so much can happen in a year. But I still remember one of the lows early Casap, and trust me, there have been many, of course. But I remember the first year, 2023, I was very clear on the problem we wanted to solve, which is like, how do we leverage, the latest in AI to help financial institutions, bank, fintech, whatnot, to instantly resolve a dispute for an honest person without losing money to less honest people. We started seeing this trend of first party fraud where honestly the fraudster these days is the person that is exactly what they say they are, buying a thing and also wanting the money, right? It's a very interesting phenomena right now. So I was very clear on the problem, and then I thought, okay, well, I was at Robinhood. My co-founder was at Chime. That's where my network is. Let me go talk to fintechs. And I, through tooth and nail, before even having a full product, had signed like maybe 5 fintechs. We call them design partners, where they would give us some sort of money and feedback, whatnot, but customers. And then 6 months later, 3 of those 5 went belly up. And I was like, I have to be both a founder and an investor and really understand which one of my customers are actually going to exist 6 months from now. And there aren't that many fintechs. Like, is this even a sustainable business model, let alone a venture backable business? And I had this moment 6 months into start. And again, like, my risk profile was kind of high because, I'm living in the middle of Manhattan. My husband had already quit his pretty lucrative job to take no money starting his own company a year earlier. And we knew that we wanted to start a family. So I'm like, did I just make one of the worst decisions of my life? And what I realized in that moment was like, okay, well, what are some assumptions I made? The assumption I made is what all these investors had told me, that I could only sign fintechs. And then once you sign fintechs, then you get the attention of larger fintechs, and then you get the attention of banks. And there's a sequence to it. Let me hear from the horse's mouth that they're going to say no to me. Like, let me go talk to banks. Let me go talk to credit unions. Let me go talk to these traditional financial institutions that are historically risk averse. And then most of them said yes. And I was just like, okay, lessons here. Well, maybe always hear it from the horse's mouth, quote unquote, and don't take other people's words for it, and believe in yourself, I guess. Like, it's so cheesy. But I think if I'd sort of given up in that moment when, 75% of my customers pretty much didn't exist later, we would not be here. So I think that was a low that have then converted to a high. But yeah, that's what comes to mind.
One quick thing before we move on, how did you get through each of those lows? Well, like, I'm talking like going out for a walk, talking with your spouse or friends, having a good, like, what got you through it and convinced you to keep going in any of those things? A good workout, I don't know, lots of things.
I did work out quite a bit. The keyword did. Like, I've not gone to the gym in like 2 months. I should work on that. But
well, you have a kid now too, so that's a workout.
I will blame her for anything that I don't do that I want to do. I was like, oh, I have a kid now. But no, I honestly, like, I would say I have, and I think this is like who I am as a person. Like, I've been through, other lows personally and professionally before. Even, 6 years at Robinhood, it was crazy. Like, very similar high highs, low lows, all of that. I think I had like 8 managers in my 6 years there. Some great, some not so great. High managers, if you're listening. But I think I'm a robustly optimistic person. What I mean by that is there's dunk your head in the sand optimism, right? And that's a very naive, brittle, glass bubble type optimism, where you just like hope and by sheer will everything will work, but then you're blindsided when things don't work, and then you're in like down in the dumps. I've always been someone that exactly, right? And I've always been someone that I've always been very I guess aware of, I guess I have a wild imagination, and I'm always on, right? Unless I'm watching a really good thriller on Apple TV, which has been crazy good so far. But I'm always imagining all the different ways things can fail in everything that I'm doing. But I have this like unexplainable kind of like optimism that, okay, in the face of all of this, that small 1% sliver where I like navigate through all of that, that's going to be the world that I create. That's going to be the life that I live in. And I think because I'm aware of everything that can go wrong, but I still believe that that's possible. And I think the other thing too is my identity, like, yes, I have to, I talk a lot on LinkedIn, and a lot of people do know me as like CEO co-founder of Casap, or, like, if they haven't heard the whole case ASAP yet, I don't actually internally consider my identity as co-founder CEO of Casap. Like my identity is much deeper than that. Like I have a very great relationship with my husband. I have a beautiful, almost 2-year-old daughter who's like the light of my life. I have great family and friends. I love to dance. Like there's so much more to me than just this. And I think that helps me feel like even when things go wrong, the world is not ending around me, even though my body viscerally feels like there's a fight or flight response. So I hope that answers your question, but like I think the combination of that is what makes me resilient enough to keep doing this thing and want to do this thing for the next like few decades, you know?
Yeah, I definitely have struggled with what you're talking about there, Shanti, of like detaching my identity from cable. That has been like a really, really difficult thing I have found to do on a consistent, ongoing basis. Um, so I always say that I think that spouses or partners of founders should get equity in their businesses automatically, because the amount of shit, am I allowed to swear on this? The amount of stuff that my wife has like had to listen to over the years of like the stories, the endless like, should I do this? These are the options. What do I do now? Like I mean, just endless conversation about cable. Probably the main way that I get out of my lows is by talking it through with her, and yeah, she's a very patient woman. But it's funny, and I'm interested how you, Shanti, kind of handled this in the early days of Casap. We had our first daughter the week after I signed my term sheet for our pre-seed round, and so we had like our daughter Delphine, like basically as I started the company, and then just under 2 years later, we had my son, and I had an ectopic pregnancy in the middle of that, and so like a lot of the story of cable is like really tied up with my family. And so the best way is, if I am stressed or if I'm feeling really low, if I could tear myself away from my desk right here and go and like take a walk or go on a bike ride or just get outside with the kids, and just to see them not caring about any of the stuff that, like, frankly, we as adults have all made up for us to care about and do with our lives, because like frankly it's all just made up stuff. To see them just like looking at butterflies or like looking at the hummingbird on the hummingbird feeder, like they just don't have this weight of the stuff that humans have managed to create for themselves to be stressed about. And I find that like the best way to get out of any funk I'm in.
This is such a sweet, like, mom's podcast.
It's like we're turning it into a mom podcast.
Yeah. But I think that's so nice too, right? Like, I feel like, you know, so for so long, at least of my fintech career, it didn't feel like there was a lot of that family balance, and certainly not amazing women founders with children. And so I think that's so great. And yeah, I definitely use my daughter for the same thing. I'm like, okay, let's go do something else. You don't care. Although she's obsessed with this microphone.
Me too. Oh my gosh. My kids are obsessed with my like little microphone, and they try and press all the keyboard buttons, and they're like turning on the lights, and yeah.
But I just wonder too, you know, having you both have experience at these massive direct to consumer brands, how do the highs feel different in B2B? And you know, as founders too, like, how do you help your teams feel the highs when it's not the people at the coffee shop being like, oh, you have that card?
Yeah, that's like it's a very good question. At Monzo, I remember thinking by the end of my time there, I will never build or work for a consumer brand again. The customer support was endless, just absolutely never ending. And the focus on a founder of a consumer brand is so much more intense than that of a B2B brand, in my opinion. Our CEO at Monzo, Tom, he was on the front page of the UK newspapers like every week. We had a one of the BBC TV programs, they made an ice Monzo card and put it outside of our office to talk about how we were freezing cards. And then they brought a live film crew and were recording outside our office with an ice Monzo card. Like, it was insane. That said, B2B has its like whole other variety of challenges. And one is like the one that you ask about specifically, Lauren, like so we're building automated control testing. how can my team get excited about that when like they're not using it every day? And that's certainly a big challenge. And so we have found that trying to really connect with like the mission of what we're doing and trying to bring education and learning to our meetups or our weekly lunches or whatever it might be, to try to make sure that they hear the reasons why we're doing what we're doing, is helpful. Bringing in people to chat as well, some of our customers, like having customers come and talk about how much excitement they're getting from the product, is a really helpful way. But it's definitely more difficult than with a consumer product. Shanti, what have you found?
Yeah, I was like thinking about that story. Yeah, talk about founders. Like I think Vlad had to deal with so much through Robinhood and like the crazy ups and downs. I actually like I made very similar to you, Tash. Like I made a very early decision in my career that if I were to start a company, it would absolutely be B2B. I think for me, that came from wanting to really understand at a deep level who every one of my customers are. And I also think the loyalty that you can build through a B2B relationship, it's very hard to replicate in a consumer relationship. Like I remember seeing that when I was at Facebook. I was at Facebook the same time Instagram launched Instagram stories, and you could essentially see just like as Instagram stories, that experiment was getting, more and more available to the general public, how Snapchat daily activity would drop. And you're like, okay, Snapchat came up with this like way of communicating, and you have these people that have been using Snapchat for, a decade at that point. Where is the loyalty? It just felt like your consumers are so fickle, and I did not want to bet my entire life and livelihood on fickle consumers such as us, right? So I think from that perspective, I decided really early on enterprise. And to answer your question around like how I think about the enterprise thing and getting the team excited, you brought up the whole thing around, okay, how do they get excited and build a deep empathy for a product they don't use themselves? That's the same thing we're asking too. Like one of our values at Casap is be an expert in the space. What are ways we can help them be experts, like truly deeply? Like I've actually been thinking about signing folks up to certification courses around disputes and chargebacks and fraud and crimes and just like financial crime, just to give people, like whether it's an engineer or marketing or sales or even my executive assistant, right? I think everyone needs to have full empathy for the problem. So like I'm totally there with you in terms of getting folks really excited. Like I think with us, like because we solve something that does have an end consumer impact with disputes, like we've actually had a lot of examples, and the teams that we support. Like I literally, I was on site with one of our customers, and we were recording. They happen to have a TV studio, which I thought was cool. So this institution had a TV studio. We were recording a testimonial on their experience with KSAP. And this is literally someone that's been doing disputes for I think 2 decades now, and she started tearing up. And I was like, huh? And she was crying happy tears because she felt like she could actually not be a robot and so much more of a human after like leveraging KSAP as her tool. And she was talking about how she was never able to leave work at work because of the deadlines, because of how intense it is when someone's like, I need my money back, I can't pay rent. She was always working weekends, evenings, mornings, to the point where they were actually going to couples therapy with her spouse, just talking through how she could handle it. And she literally was like, in the case study for KSAP, I want to put the couples therapy I no longer have to pay for, and my husband would be here and wanting to talk to you about like the impact KSAP made. And again, I think this is like an edge. I'm not hearing this all the time. But yeah, I can't say on my tagline on my website, KSAP saving marriages, but it's just like that really struck me, and I started crying. So there was just like this like little sob, happy tear situation. But I think, and we actually flew her into our New York office, had her meet with the whole team. But like, I think there's something about the teams that you support and helping them do their best work, and this, kind of end impact that has for their consumers, who's able to make rent, who's feeling like their back is covered by this institution, all of that. Like it was super meaningful. So yeah, I don't know. There's certain moments like that. It's not every day, but when you have those moments, you hold on to them for dear life, I think.
Can I ask a question? That is amazing. That's such a cool story. Can I ask a question about something you said earlier? You said that with consumer apps, like the loyalty feels so fickle. Do you think that is going to change with AI? Because like before, Robinhood was like the product to do any kind of, it's like the new way to buy, keep, sell, trade equities. But it's like a one product fits all. And now with AI, it's so much cheaper to do niche products for a smaller group of people and to make that financially viable because of AI. And so do you think we're going to start seeing a lot more products, but with smaller user bases, but that are very viable businesses with much higher brand loyalty?
Absolutely. So there's actually two ways I think that's going to manifest. So one is like, here's my take. You guys are going to get my hot take on fintech, right? That's what we're here for. So like, I feel like every financial institution on this planet, fintech, bank, credit union, you name it, is trying to do the same thing. Everyone wants to have that primary financial relationship. Like I can ask you, Lauren, where do you keep all your money? And I, as your bank, would want you to say my name. But at the end of the day, there's only like 15 different financial products an institution could provide to their customers. And at the end of the day, it's a commoditized industry. Like you have to realize, like, within Robinhood, we'd say, oh, credit card, this is 0 to 1. This is so exciting. Wait list. How many credit cards can the average American choose from? A ton. So my point to answer your question, Tosh, is like, on one end, I think people will differentiate by real access to relevant value. Relevant is the whole like AI thing, right? Where it's like you have a niche, like a card for certain immigrants from a certain country that need a certain thing. Or if you look at credit unions, they were actually segmentation based, right? So there's a credit union in Southern California that is literally focused on teachers, and they have all these financial products that surround things that teachers need, right? They take summer vacation. Maybe there's certain ways that you can tailor to that. Their payroll is like through the school, and there's certain. So I think it's really understanding the needs of a demographic, and I totally believe in niche sort of financial services winning. The other way I also think about AI changing things is the same thing I focused on at Robinhood for a few years, which is network effects. Like when I think about a consumer app that has my insane loyalty, I think of Spotify. Even if there was a Spotify like copycat that showed up tomorrow, cheaper, $10 cheaper, whatnot a month. I don't remember what I pay for Spotify. I wouldn't move. I wouldn't move because I have like sweat equity in Spotify. It knows me. Like it knows me better than I know myself, at least my music taste. So it's like, to me, it's like you pick an audience and you focus on their true jobs to be done, their like internal needs, and you make it so that the more they use it, the more they need to stay here because no one else has the context that this relationship has. But I think the financial industry, I think they're quite far from like really achieving that. Does that resonate? Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I think that we're going to see a lot more smaller brands, and it's going to be interesting to see what it does to the VC industry as well, because there's going to be less need for investment on the smaller end, and then as we've already started to see, like more investment needs at the bigger end, or not. We'll see how any of those investments play out, but like, yeah.
That's an interesting call out. That's actually an interesting call out because I feel like, in the early days when you think about like the origin of venture, when we had all these big consumer brands, a lot of that money went to like marketing, right? Like when I think about some of Robinhood's biggest spend or Monzo's biggest spend, it's like that marketing budget, the competing on the Apple, like the App Store ads or the Google ads or, whatever.
I think there were stories about like how much SoFi spent on marketing each year, and people were like, this is absurd. And then of course they bought SoFi Stadium, which has turned out to be brilliant with how many Super Bowls and everything have been there. But
exactly. Like we even did a Super Bowl ad and a few different, there's a whole story of marketing ads that did not work at Robinhood. But like, I think the question that I was kind of asking with that is like, okay, well, that was a requirement of capital, right? You needed to land grab, you needed to get that awareness. How does that work for B2B? I'm not saying we don't need marketing. We absolutely need marketing, but it's a very different economics, I think, being B2B enterprise focused on financial institutions, where it's like, how we think about venture dollars and how we think about deploying capital, I think needs to be very different than what venture was originally sort of known for in tech like a decade ago. You know what I mean?
I do think it's so different B2C and B2B with regards to the venture, because yes, on the B2C side, marketing and then also customer support, both of which have now fundamentally changed with AI. On the B2B side, I don't know that niche products work the same, right? Because whenever we talk to a chief compliance officer at a bank, they don't want 10 different tools for the 10 different niche things they have to do. They want one tool. And so there's still going to be this like aggregation problem on the B2B side that I don't think exists necessarily on the B2C side.
In fact, I'll take it even a step further. I think what like AI enables us, agentic AI enables us to do is actually provide outcomes, right? Like I feel like so far we've been so focused on workflow integrations tools. But I actually feel like if we can think of it as like teams and outcomes, but the teams and outcomes are AI enabled, it's a very interesting nuance. But I think that also changes how the enterprise sale will be. Whereas like I think we're actually going to move more into like AI native services versus AI native platforms.
I have a question for you guys since we've brought up the topic of AI. On CNBC, I think earlier today there was an article, probably some consulting firm did a project where it's like AI could eliminate 30% of like incoming college graduate jobs. And given that, one of the questions I like to ask on here is if you were a recent college grad, what areas of fintech would you want to be getting into right now? So kind of take those two, like combining those two things. What advice would you have for someone that either undergrad or MBA is graduating is like, I want to make it big in fintech. I want to climb my way up the corporate ladder, maybe start my own company one day. What advice would you have for them?
I saw a headline yesterday that the CEO of Palantir basically said you either need to be in professional services or you need to be like neurodivergent to succeed in the future, which I think is such a bullshit take. But that aside,
I can't believe he said that. That's wild.
Have you seen the CEO of Palantir? I actually can't believe that guy would say that. Other people, but I've met him like, yeah.
I think that it actually like right now hasn't changed hugely the advice that I'd give to the advice that I was giving when I joined Monzo. So when I graduated from university, I had a law degree. I knew I didn't want to become a lawyer. I went to Ernst & Young and I spent 3 years doing the accountancy qualification, working in corporate finance, like a graduate scheme. Pretty quickly realized I hated that, spent another 2 years doing that, and then moved into tech. The thing that I was just so amazed by was the opportunities and the speed of learning at a small startup versus a huge corporation like Ernst & Young. Just hands down different worlds. And so my advice still would be just get any entry-level job at any startup. Because if in a small startup that has got venture backing, there is going to be an inbuilt urgency. There is going to be new and just an increasing amount of stuff to be done. And the amount that you'll learn in 2 years, even if the startup dies, even if you don't find your area of passion that is where you end up for the next 10, 20 years, you will learn so much that you'll know a little bit about what you don't want to do. And you'll be set up to go join the next startup. I think I certainly had this, and I imagine other people do. I was so concerned as a young graduate to find the path that I would be on forever. And already, like I'm 37, already I have had a corporate finance career. I've had a head of financial crime at a fintech career. I've had a founder career. Like I'll probably have 2 or 3 or 4 other careers. And that was a foreign concept to certainly my parents, but probably like our parents' generation. My mum was a dentist and she worked in literally the same room for 30 years. And so her concept of me moving jobs was like, panic. And so the advice I would give to young people is like, just get a job in a startup, because the amount that you'll learn and the things that you'll know that you do like and importantly don't like, those things will just happen quicker. And the experience that you'll gain will just be absolutely useful for whatever it is you want to do.
Yeah, I'm pretty much with you there. I think the thing I would also add to that is like what I realized that I got kind of lucky with is I ended up building a skill stack, kind of like how like tech has their stacks. I have a skill stack of things that I've touched that I know I'm good at, things that I've touched that I know I'm not good at, things that are really important that I know I'll always delegate. But like pretty much I have a very good understanding of how I want to spend my time and what my unique sort of skills are. And I think it benefits people because, at a startup or even at a big company, you kind of get pulled into where's the org, where's the reorg, where's my manager going, where's the market going, what do the investors want us to do? So like being able to navigate some of that to be like, okay, cool. Like I have enough in product. Like, can I get some in design? Okay, I have enough in design. Can I get some in like just technical speak or like engineering? So I think that's like the other piece of advice I'd give. And then the other thing too is like, man, I look at like what Claude can do these days. And I'm just like, I need to be constantly reinventing how I spend my time and the assumptions I make on like a clip I've never had to do before. That used to be like every New Year's resolution, let me play around with things over the holidays, to every weekend I feel like I need to try different things, try new skills, connectors, stuff like that. So I just feel like if someone was graduating college now, start up, understand what skills you have and what skills you want for, things you want to be able to do in the future. Don't think of it in terms of titles, but like outcomes that you'd want to be able to drive, and then dedicate 20% of your time to constantly understanding and reinventing your perception of the world, in my opinion. It's wild.
Awesome. Maybe just to round it out, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I don't know that there's like one. There have been so many bits of advice that have felt at that moment like the most important piece of advice. And that, what that actually tells me is that the advice that is the best is like, surround yourself with people that you can call, because the advice that I have gotten that has always felt like the best advice has been because I've had the opportunity to call somebody who is an expert in that area. So Lauren, we were introduced in like December 2020 when I was just starting cable, and you gave me a ton of advice about how to sell to banks. Fast forward, right? 3-4 years later, I have the opportunity to have this advisor and a mentor and an investor who is the chief revenue officer and like founding team member at Marqeta. I can call him up, and it's like the ability to like have people that you can call that at the right moment can give you the piece of advice that you need right then. That's how I have found those pieces of advice that at that moment I've been like, oh my God, of course, that's the best piece of advice that I have ever had. Over the 6 years of cable, there isn't one piece of advice that sticks out because there's just so much to do. And there are so many different challenges. And honestly, like I have changed so much, right? That like the kind of advice that I need varies so much. And so to like totally not answer the question and to flip it back round, the advice that I would give is like surround yourself with people who can at the right time give you the advice that will help. And those might be angel investors, they might be advisors, they might be friends, they might be family members, they might just be people in the industry that you're fortunate enough to be introduced to. But those relationships and that advice that they can give over the years that I've been doing this, that has always been the best advice I've gotten.
It reminds me, I think it was Stephanie Kirkpatrick that's has told me before, like one of the best pieces of advice she got was have a 911 list, which is people that you can call, whether it be work, personal, whatever. Like those are the ones they're gonna answer, they're gonna talk you through it, give you great advice, and you're set.
And Stephanie is an angel investor in cable, and actually the advisor that I'm talking about from Marqeta, we both share, and she has talked about him a lot. So yeah, Stephanie's very wise.
He's on both of your 911 list.
He sure is. Yeah.
Shanti, what about you?
Yeah, it's really hard to think about a piece of advice I've received, but I think honestly, yeah. So I'll like flip it around and just be like, if there's like one thing I would advise people to think about on this journey, which I've learned from like just like first hand experience, is like always, I would say always understand and focus on what drives your customer, right? Your customer, even in enterprise, it's people, right? I feel like for all of our prospects and all of our customers, I know what gets them going. I know what gets them scared. I know what makes them look really good. I know what they're thinking about like next year and the year after that. And I feel like as long as we're driving that value and there's a really great open line between me and them, regardless of how great things are going or how better things could be going, everything else, we will build a good business. Venture funding will always be that. I think that's the other thing too. It's like there's a world where you can do things for great funding rounds that are it's mutually exclusive from building a good business, believe it or not. Like I feel like that's just I think I've always focused on building a good business, and the money has always been there when we needed it. Knock on wood that continues to be the case. But I think it's just like there's so much distraction, right? There's so much stimuli that we could respond to. There's probably at least 50 emails I haven't responded to yet that I need to work on, but it's just like if there's like one thing that's super important, is just making sure we're always continually driving customer value and that customer brand and relationship that we have, and like everything else will be good. So like that's kind of what I use when I'm like sitting looking at my inbox, that just wanting to like close it out on a Sunday, being like, I don't even know where to start. I'm like, all right, where are my customers at? Let me go figure that out first. So yeah, that's probably what I would say.
Lauren, what's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten?
Oh no.
I'm curious about that.
Again, I can edit out the pauses too. So
I spend a ton of time with my coach, and I think someone along the way must have told me to get one of those. And I think that's actually been the best piece of advice. And actually, maybe it was Tess, or the co-founder at Spade, where I work now, that made that mandate. But having Janice, amazing coach, and just that time to think about the job and about what I'm bringing to the job and what I need for my life, not just my professional life, but my whole life, has just been so transformational for me, in every way, like not just in how I lead teams and how I participate in teams and how I show up when it is family time, and in recognizing the value of the network and how to keep investing and growing that 911 list and what have you. So yeah, I think that the advice to have a coach, or to at least have time to really think about like how we're doing the work, not just doing the work, which was really, really, really hard for me for a long time, was definitely the best advice.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I want your coach. I've looked at coaches. I haven't found anyone I really liked. I need an introduction. Tosh, do you have a coach? I'm curious.
She's amazing.
talk to Janice.
Yeah.
I think it's been 5 years. Like I'm all in on Janice.
Wow. All right, Janice. Just I need her number or email.
There you go. Here's the referral.
Love
if anyone
it.
else on here needs Janice's number, ping Lauren.
Yeah.
Lauren, I wonder, having spent some time with Janice, often when I like reflect on the time I've spent with my coach or with different mentors and advisors and people over the years, like the thing that actually most decisions, most action like comes back to is just being able to follow my own gut. And I wonder if you have any like similar thoughts, that like actually like a lot of your conversations lead back to, you already know what to do, take away everything else.
So a lot of it's following your gut, but I think like my gut, at least personally, I'm pretty reactive. I get over things really quickly, but in the moment I get to a 10. And so a lot of it is kind of like the work you do in trying to work with your kids on their reactions is probably a lot related to the work I do with Janice to like maintain my composure. But I think probably like early in our time together, it was really focused on that. Like, how can other people bring such a different energy to a meeting? Like, don't they know how important it is? To then like, now it's having that time to reflect, and yeah, maybe still being able to hear that crazy reaction, but think like, why am I having it? And is it right or is it wrong?
I'm an Aries, so I can so relate to that. I am just like a spicy like I can't hide the reaction. It's just there.
Yeah, I'm a Scorpio. I'm gonna get mad.
Scorpio.
I'm a Taurus, but I don't know what that means about me. So maybe you guys should tell me. But yes, I'm a
Well, I don't know about you, but my son is a Taurus, and I understand that it is a particularly stubborn star sign.
Honestly, yeah. I think it's so funny. My husband was literally talking to me about this last night, where he was just like, yeah, see, you think you're really easygoing, but you're actually very stubborn underneath it all. Very few people know that. And I was like, okay, cool. Good to know. So yeah, checks out.
Oh man. Well, this episode has been so much fun to record. I literally was messaging back and forth with Kelsey as we were going. I was like, I love this episode so far. They're so good together. This is amazing. But I'm excited for this one to come out. I think people are really going to enjoy listening to it. Just like, you guys had such good perspectives. We dove into so many different things. I truly enjoyed this conversation.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, love that. Thank you.
Thank you all.